Alrighty, hello kids. 31st of January 2024. It's 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. It's normal time for Chat with Matt, here to spend half an hour with you guys, talk about whatever you want to talk about. I think I posted on my little poster, love your light and shine out bright. I think I said ask us anything. I mean it, you can ask us anything. Can be a request, can be a question, can be a suggestion, can be a statement that it's not actually asking us anything either. But anyway, I am very, very happy in the future, at least, for people to write on that little notification what they would like us to talk about. But as it so happens, no one wrote anything in other than a very simple question. Actually, I've got to refresh this because it's not showing here. It was showing on my phone. Which is, I like the photo. What a stunning photo. Who took it? I answered that. Marie took that photo. That was Bali a few years ago, probably 2019, I think, on the Sanua Lagoon at sunrise. Which is a very nice place to take photos because you get that beautiful reflection because the water's really still because it's a lagoon inside the reef. Anywho's, yeah, what's going on, my friends? We had a pretty full-on full moon last week, so it was like 5 days ago now. That was cool. Full moon in Leo. Awesome time to connect with your heart and find out what's, or inquire a little bit more deeply into what you are, could use the word passionate about, what you are, what really is important to you, to your heart, and find some conviction there, I think. I've been thinking a lot about courage lately. I think I talked on the live stream that I did from the top of the Mount Elder, about that. This idea of courage is basically a heartfelt conviction that helps you to overcome your fears, rather than bravery being a mentality that it's good, right, or proper for you to step past your fear, right? To feel the fear and do it anyway because you are brave, a mental construct, owning a label of bravery, whereas, you know, as a rightness, because it's right to be brave. I'm not saying it's wrong to be brave. I'm just pointing out the difference. There's a time for bravery, of course, but courage for me seems much more deep, inherent, natural, right? When you are have a high conviction in what's important to you, then you easily find the bravery or the courage to step past whatever's limiting your ability to move towards that outcome, right? Or what you feel is in alignment with what you are aligned with in your heart. That's it. So courage really comes from a heart-based conviction or devotion to the outcome that you really feel is important. And bravery comes from a mentality that it's good, right, or proper to step past your fears. And of course, if you have a deep courage coming from your heart, then it's easy to be brave. And if you don't, then your bravery is always going to waver as you have to negotiate the doubts in a much more nefarious way. I don't know if nefarious is the right word to use there, but your doubts have much more influence over you. Hey, Sister Tanya, and I think I saw M. Rose as well, but maybe I was wrong. So yeah, that's what I'm feeling at the moment, that it's a really good time to double down on what you feel is important to you, and to get clear on what's influencing your feelings around what's important. I think it's all very well to have a sensation or a mentality that something's important to you, but until you really question why, that is not as stable as you might like, right? It's easy to be challenged when you don't know yourself why you are convicted in that direction, and whether it's really coming from a deep intrinsic knowing or whether it's some program that you've inherited over the time. Is it your parents' conviction that you are championing? And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's not that that's a bad thing, because quite often these things run in lineages, and that's okay. But can you go beyond that? Why were your parents, highly convicted in that direction? And why are you following in their footsteps? Is it past life? Is it, inherent to you and your making? Or is it just a rightness that you've believed? Because those rightnesses that we believe are easily, they're like houses of cards. Our mind is very fickle. And even though something can be well entrenched because we've always believed it and we've had it reinforced, numerous times by our family or whatever has been putting it in there, religious conviction can be similar, right? It's still not as deep as something that's coming from our own heart, from a deeper sort of soul-based desire, alignment, intrinsic importance. And it can be very, very destabilizing when one of these sort of deep mental beliefs gets challenged to the point where it crumbles, right? When the house of cards falls, it can feel very, very catastrophic, and we can be very, very lost when we lose something that we felt was very important to us, but wasn't that important to us, right? We believed that it was important to us because we'd always been told that it was. And then when we come to the realization that it was a crock of shit, for want of a better term, then it's an awesome opportunity, but also it can be very, very destabilizing time. And I guess very destabilizing times are awesome opportunities, and not something that needs to be avoided for the sake of it. But sometimes it can be helpful to do the work before we have a meltdown, a breakdown, catastrophe. So yeah, consciously choosing to dig into what's driving us, what's important to us, what's motivating us, what's influencing us day to day, right? Looking, a lot of people, like this idea of mapping out their values, writing a mission statement. But if that's just coming from the surface without a deeper inquiry into why we find these things valuable, why we find certain morals important to us, then it's fragile. It's very fragile. The work has to come from a deeper inquiry, and that can be confronting, right? Why is it important for us to be kind? Why do we feel that it's good, important, imperative even for us to be a good person? I remember there's a sparrow feeding its baby just on top of the aviary. Baby's all fluffy. I remember when I was inquiring, and this is in my teens, when I was contemplating the idea that only Catholics went to heaven, right? This was being well propagated in the early 80s in the church I was going to at the time, that only the Catholics were going to heaven. And so that was quite confronting for me because it didn't make sense. And yet I was trying to find a degree of meaning in religion, right? Trying to find some spirituality in the church. And while there's certain teachings there that did make sense, core teachings of religion, about, doing what you would like done to yourself, etc., doing to others as you would have done unto yourself. That made sense. But only the Catholics are going to heaven didn't make sense. And so contemplating, how there would be a God who was so judgmental that only people who went to a specific brand of Christianity were the chosen ones was interesting. It was interesting to contemplate and to go through the rationale and to really wonder why people would believe this and why they would believe it on such a high level, with such conviction, mental conviction, that they all seemed to believe it. They kept turning up to church and kept subjecting themselves to this doctrine. So then when you choose to throw out one doctrine of a organization and see that that they, was quite black and white in their eyes, the church's eyes, that only the Catholics were going to heaven, then you have to question everything else that they're telling you, right? And then how do you start to, believe some of the stuff they're telling you, but not other stuff that they're telling you, right? How do you start having to wade through it? Because the thing that's appealing about religion, I think, and any form of rule-based sort of doctrine or way of life, is that it allows you to be lazy. I think that's a big appeal, is that you just have to follow the rules, right? And if you follow the rules, and the rules or the organization will look after you. That's the idea. That's the idea with society as well, and the law that we have over here. We sort of allow ourselves to be limited by the law because the payoff is the law supposedly is looking after us, and then no bad things will happen to us because we're all doing the right thing based on the law. Saying like crock of shit, and only the Catholics go to heaven is in my childhood also. Yeah. So anyways, I forgot where I got. Yeah, so we kind of get very lazy in wanting to just trust. And I've been thinking a lot about this word trust as well, because it's one of my words for the year. I've got 2 words for the year. I work every year basically with 2 words. This year it's trust and love. Trust, love. And so really thinking about this thing of we call trust, and where our trust should be applied. And a lot of people, have a very disempowered relationship with trust. They believe it's right to trust other people inherently, or to trust authority inherently, or trust religion, which is a form of authority, inherently. And the idea is trust is either yes or no, right? You either trust it or you don't. It's all in or nothing. And so if you go all in and trust the religion to look after you, then you basically have to stop inquiring as to whether something is a quote-unquote crock of shit, right? Like only the Catholics go to heaven. Because if you challenge that, then you basically challenge the whole thing, and then the whole house of cards come down. You can't just pull one card out from the house of cards, right? The whole house tumbles, and then you're left with nothing, and now you're lost, right? And now you don't have a framework, you don't have a structure to do life. I was talking earlier about structures. So my word's courage, yeah, and it covers a lot, and love, yeah, perfect. And courage and love are very, very linked, as I was talking about earlier. Courage basically comes from the French word cor, meaning heart. So courage is the age of the heart. It's living from your heart. So that has a lot to do with love. So perfect words, Tanya. So yeah, that's the thing, is if we're going to trust something, if our version of trust is all or nothing, right? You trust someone implicitly. They're going to do what they say. They're going to look after you. This form of trust is crazy, in my opinion, right? It's a very disempowered version of trust. Ideally, trust is about trusting yourself and trusting your own knowing in any particular moment. And when you know something is a quote-unquote crock of shit, I'm going to use this a few more times, I think, today, because it seems to be the term of the day. then you should be willing to allow that knowing to influence how you are behaving, right? And where you're going. Trusting yourself, I think, is the most important aspect of trust, right? Trusting your own knowing and trusting yourself to know what to trust in the moment, rather than applying trust as some sort of conclusion. Oh, I trust that person. So what? You're not going to inquire as to whether what they're doing is beneficial to you or not, or what they're doing is good, right, or proper anymore, because you quote unquote trust them, right? It's like, again, it's just laziness. It's like, oh no, I trust that person. It's like they've been put in the bucket of trust, so therefore you don't have to inquire into what they're doing or how they're acting or what they're saying, because you trust them. It's like, oh, I trust this religion means you turn off your inquiring mind now and you just do what they say. Oh, I trust doctors. You turn up to the doctor, they tell you to take this pill, you take it, no questions asked, right? We can see that it's crumbling, this level. It's, there's so many incidences now that have us question, whether that's a smart way, an appropriate way to do the world, right? And so this is what's creating a lot of chaos, because people are losing trust with these external forms of authority, whether it's the medical system, the judicial system, the religious system, the education system, other people, right? Our spouse, people who like the idea of just trusting our spouse because that's what we're supposed to do, right? Yeah, you can trust your spouse to be who they are, right? A person. That doesn't mean you trust everything they say is correct, or everything they do is going to be the best for you, right? You've got to understand what trust really means. And I think there's a lot of inquiry to do around that for a lot of people to move forward. I was going to loop back around to something. Only the Catholics go to heaven. What I was inquiring about after that was something. Oh, yeah. Looping back around after I sort of left the church, and, as I said, it's all or nothing. When you leave the church, then what's next? And for me, at age 14 or 15 or whatever it was, recognizing that I had a very sharp intellect, very critical mind, I loved science. I loved the promise of science, which is another interesting doctrine, which is no better than religion, by the way. Science as a process is great, right? Science is basically questioning and looking at evidence. Great. But science as a doctrine, which says trust the science, again, is a crazy notion, right? Which is basically saying trust the facts that are known today. Which is stupid, because we've seen over and over again that science keeps evolving, because everything is supposed to be questioned in science and not trusted. Just because someone's come to a conclusion and it has been accepted doesn't mean that no one should look at that again, right? Because otherwise we'd still be believing the earth is flat. We'd still be believing that the atom is the smallest indivisible particle. We'd still be believing a lot of things, right? If the current status wasn't challenged by other scientists, and with better equipment as things keep evolving and different rationale, looking at potential other answers. And it doesn't mean that the first answer was wrong. It usually just means that it was limited, right? When we only had optical telescopes, we could only see so far. We could only make certain assumptions, and we couldn't really understand the nature of black holes, as an example, because we didn't have the measuring equipment to get into quantum physics. We didn't have the measuring equipment to see into the vastness of the universe. So, of course, with that evidence, we could only come to, or the scientists of the day could only come to, certain conclusions. Those conclusions were revolutionary at the time, but have since been surpassed or superseded, right? Just like Newtonian physics. Amazing, allowed us to build an amazing world, and we still use it today, right? Newton was an absolute fucking genius in coming up with some very simple equations that do a very good job of approximating how the natural world, or at least the physical world, behaves. But now, with quantum physics, we've proved that fundamentally those equations are limited and they're not correct. They're not absolutely correct, although they do a very good job of summarizing or approximating how the world works, right? And so we can still use the equations. We don't need to throw them out. We don't need to go back to first principles. We still use them because they're useful, but they're not the absolute truth. And this is how science works. We keep digging deeper and deeper. But anyway, going back to my story, because I seem to be telling this story today, at age 14, 15, dove into science and believed that the world, right, became basically atheist, believed that the world was all a reality that was dependent upon me being alive, the chemical reaction going on in my body, and when that chemical reaction ceased, then I would cease to exist implicitly, right? That there was no afterlife, because that's what religion taught. And if religion also taught that only the Catholics go to heaven, then I'm not willing to trust that, right? Yeah, well, we can look into NASA and all sorts of conspiracies as well, Tanya, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. The point is, in throwing it all out and coming back to this idea that it's all just a chemical reaction, right? And that it's all, you know, purely science, and this is all about my survival and inherent evolution, as I've grown from a single-celled amoeba in a fucking ocean somewhere and evolved into now this complex human with all of these emotion and mental traits. Why do I feel strongly about things? What is shaping, you know, this is what I've started to inquire, especially when I got to older teenage years, you know, 18, 19, 20. I don't think 20 is a teenage year anymore, but anyway, but around this age, really inquiring as to why I feel moralistically compelled to do things that are beneficial to others. Is it simply just that I'm looking for approval from these people and I need them for my survival? Is it that I'm fearful of the law? Or is there something deeper, right? I kept feeling there's something deeper that felt really good, really intrinsically good to do what you might call nice things or kind things, right? Beyond just a hit of satisfaction, beyond the idea that, oh, I've done the right thing and therefore I'm a good person. There was a deep desire to be helpful. Where's that coming from? Where's that coming from in this scale of I'm just biology, and when I drop to the ground, I'm going to disintegrate, basically, right? And no longer exist. Why do I want to leave a legacy? Why do I want to be remembered in any way, you know, for being useful or purposeful or kind, you know? So all of these questions going on as I'm sort of dancing with the idea that, you know, my current paradigm is, from this atheist point of view, that there is nothing after this and this is just a chemical reaction of the body. And it was hard. It was difficult to, you know, apply my linear logical engineering brain, right? By now I'm going to university, I'm training as an engineer, to these deeper concepts, when I was always wanting, the ego always wants to overly simplify things. This is what leads humanity into such disempowered relationships, I think, with authority and stuff, because we love the idea of things being simple. We love the idea that we understand of totally how the world works. And this is why we love the idea of a set of rules that we can follow and we don't have to keep thinking. Because thinking's hard. Thinking takes energy. Thinking can leave us perplexed, and it can leave us feeling vulnerable, right? When we recognize that we don't really understand things, we feel a little bit vulnerable. We can feel a little bit stupid. We can feel a little bit threatened by the world. So it's very appealing to be presented with a doctrine or a structure that relieves you of the need to keep inquiring, to keep thinking, really, right? People love to put their brain in a park and just do what they're told. They love that. I love that too sometimes, of course. I love doing simple tasks from time to time where you're not having to think too much, right? It's a routine thing, and you can go into a form of you know, meditative state, because you're not having to inquire. There's definitely appeal to that. But to truly live on this planet, I think we have to come back more to first principles more often. I guess to complete the story, well, it's not complete, but to move on with the story, how it all ended up. Come age 25, and I was still, you know, feeling a bit lost without religion, without fully trusting that there was nothing else afterwards. I stumbled into a yoga class because I had a sore back, and luckily found meditation and the yogic or the Sanskrit or the Vedic or the Hindu texts and understandings and teachings, the idea of karma, the idea of rebirth, the idea, you know, some of these older, you know, 5,000 up to 10,000 year old ideas, which was far less rule based, although there was still, you know, a structure there. While it was a step forward, I've since surpassed that as well. But anyway, that's probably long enough on the story with the evolution of Matt. But I was trying to, I think the intent of telling that story, although long-winded, was to emphasize the idea of letting go, of allowing ourselves to be so easily railroaded into a belief system, into a rule base, and understand that this rule base is also there in non-conformist structures as well, right? Activists, anarchists also have a similar but different structure that they operate from. And while they might saying, you know, fuck the authorities, they're all doing it in a non sort of thinking way. It's like, you know, they've oversimplified the world again, and they're now living from this doctrine that basically the basic tenet is that all authority is bad and wrong, and we're going to resist it at all costs, right? Without actually inquiring into which structures are actually useful or anything else. If it's a structure, it's wrong, we've got to tear it down, right? If they're globalists, they're wrong, we have to destroy them. You know, if they're using fossil fuels as another example, right, then they're bad and wrong. And we're going to resist it, and we're going to fight it. We're going to fight. We're going to fight. We're going to fight against this. And that's their doctrine. And again, it's an oversimplification. It's a belief system, and it's a structure that's not absolutely useful. Well, not absolutely correct is probably a better way of saying it, right? But yet it's an oversimplification, and it makes life easy because your decisions are made for you. All you need to do is decide whether something fits into a category or not, to know whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, and then you know how to behave towards it, right? You just categorize things. You know, is this a rich old white man? Bad, as an example, right? Which is in many ways no better than saying, is this a black person or a person of color? Bad, right? Which was the old doctrine. So people are very, very quick to want to categorize and then judge things because it's simple. And people love simplicity because they are lazy. Humans are lazy. And I'm not making humans wrong for being lazy. I'm not making any of those particular categories wrong. It's human nature to band together in similarities and then all hold a similar mindset, and then all feel that we are right, and anyone who doesn't fit into our category are wrong, and therefore we're in a tribe, and our tribe is going to outcompete the other tribes, or we're going to fight, or we feel meaning in being in this tribe and fighting other tribes, whatever it means, whether it's vax or anti-vax, this or that, right? Doesn't matter where you want to draw the line. If you're not using your head, if you're not inquiring, if you're not feeling into your heart as to why you are behaving in a certain way, why you are influenced by certain things, what's motivating you in this moment, then you're not really living, right? You're running a program. You're running a program. You're like a robot running a program. and you're not truly engaging in the opportunity that life is giving you. And so this is not yes or no, by the way. We're all running programs. I'm running programs. It's not that we're trying to avoid all programs. Some programs are actually quite useful. The point is, again, is to inquire and to bring a little bit more thought, a little bit more feeling, a little bit more inquiry into your day, into your life, into what's motivating you. And I guess we just to draw all this back up into a neat bundle, well, it's not that neat, but we started with this idea of, you know, the full moon was for me was about inquiring more into my heart about what's important, right? What's important to your heart and why? And understand that that's not going to be a conclusion. It's not going to be finished. Just like science, we can only go as deep into our heart as we have the tools to go into our heart now. And with time, as the vibration keeps rising and we keep purifying ourselves, we can go deeper into our heart. And what we find in our heart today, we are likely to supersede in the future, which is absolutely fine, right? We're not looking for conclusions. We're not looking to find the absolute motivation, our absolute drivers. It's what's driving us today, what's important to us today, what's influencing us today, and why. And holding space that's going to change with time. It doesn't need to be a conclusion, and we don't need to, you know, it's like we want a conclusion because then we can tick it off, then we don't need to do it again. But the point of going into your heart is it should be a very routine thing to do, right? It should be, you know, consistent. Maybe weekly, maybe daily, maybe hourly. You know, I used to set my freaking stopwatch on my phone to beep every well, for a while it was every half hour, but every hour or every 2 hours. Stop, take a couple of breaths, reconnect with your heart. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? You know, bring yourself back into the present, because sometimes we just get lost in the frustration of trying to achieve something or whatever it is, right? And we find ourselves on autopilot. Just stopping and taking 2 deep breaths, recentering, can allow ourselves to bring clarity into what's going on in this moment, and then allow us to make a conscious decision about what's appropriate and how we can move forward in a more empowered way, right? As opposed to allowing the program to keep pushing us forward and allow ourselves to keep feeling frustrated or keep feeling defeated or keep feeling whatever it is, right? And sometimes it requires some sort of mechanical device like a stopwatch, or an electronic device as we use these days to give us that structure to consistently come back, to take a pause, to take some breaths, to ground in, to reconnect to our heart. What's important to me right now? What's important to me right now? What would love do in this moment? Right? What would I do if I really love myself right now? What would Jesus do in this situation is another one that you could employ depending on what your relationship with Jesus is like. Or someone else. Doesn't have to be Jesus. Any great saint or someone who motivates you or someone you have a connection with spiritually. So, yeah. How am I doing for time? I've done my half hour. So, and thank you very much. That's probably Chat with Matt for today. Hopefully it was useful to you guys in some way. If you have any questions, comments or concerns, you can always put them in the comments below this, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can put it in the comments there. You can reach out to me on email, mantara@mantara.nz, or send me a messenger or courier pigeon or whatever. Here to serve. Quite happy to be challenged. Much love to you all. Bye for now.